Question 1. Governance review demonstrates that the Albany Law School Admissions Committee is considering an applicant who has presented compelling evidence of significant personal hardship during their undergraduate years, which they believe impacted their academic record. The committee is tasked with deciding whether to grant this applicant an interview, which is a standard step for candidates whose applications warrant further consideration. Option A. Conduct a thorough review of the applicant's submitted documentation, seek additional clarifying information from the applicant if necessary, and then convene a committee discussion to assess the impact of the hardship on their overall application and potential for success at Albany Law School, making a decision based on a holistic evaluation. Option B. Forward the application to a separate subcommittee for a decision on whether to grant an interview, without providing them with the committee's initial assessment of the applicant's potential. Option C. Immediately deny the applicant an interview based on their undergraduate GPA, as the established minimum GPA threshold for interviews has not been met, without further consideration of any mitigating circumstances. Option D. Grant the applicant an interview solely based on the emotional appeal of their personal hardship statement, without a substantive review of their academic record or other application components. Correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough review of the applicant's submitted documentation, seek additional clarifying information from the applicant if necessary, and then convene a committee discussion to assess the impact of the hardship on their overall application and potential for success at Albany Law School, making a decision based on a holistic evaluation. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate needs of a student with the long-term integrity of the admissions process and the ethical obligations of the admissions committee. The admissions committee must uphold the standards set by Albany Law School while also considering individual circumstances. The core tension lies between maintaining fairness and consistency in evaluating all applicants and the potential for compassionate consideration of an applicant facing extraordinary hardship. The correct approach involves a thorough, documented review of the applicant's situation, seeking additional information where necessary, and applying established admissions criteria with a degree of flexibility that is both justifiable and transparent. This approach respects the applicant's circumstances while adhering to the principles of fair evaluation and institutional integrity. It acknowledges that while academic merit and potential are paramount, extenuating circumstances can be a relevant factor when properly assessed and documented. This aligns with the ethical duty of admissions professionals to be fair, impartial, and to act in the best interest of the institution and its applicant pool. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the applicant's immediate distress without a comprehensive review risks undermining the admissions process. This could lead to accusations of favoritism or a lowering of standards, which is ethically problematic and could damage the school's reputation. Failing to document the decision-making process or to seek further information when warranted is a failure of due diligence and transparency. Another incorrect approach that rigidly adheres to predefined metrics without any consideration for extenuating circumstances, even when presented with compelling evidence, can be seen as lacking in compassion and potentially overlooking a candidate who, despite initial academic indicators, possesses significant potential and resilience. This approach, while seemingly objective, can be ethically questionable if it leads to the exclusion of a deserving candidate due to circumstances beyond their control without a proper review. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Acknowledging and validating the applicant's stated challenges. 2. Gathering all relevant information, including supporting documentation, to understand the full scope of the situation. 3. Consulting established admissions policies and guidelines to determine how such circumstances can be accommodated, if at all. 4. Engaging in a deliberative process with other members of the admissions committee, ensuring diverse perspectives are considered. 5. Documenting the entire process, including the rationale for the final decision, to ensure accountability and transparency. 6. Communicating the decision clearly and respectfully to the applicant. Question 2. When evaluating an applicant for admission to Albany Law School, and you have a close personal relationship with the applicant's family, what is the most ethically and professionally sound approach to ensure the integrity of the admissions process? Option A. Objectively assess the applicant's qualifications against all established admissions criteria, and if a conflict of interest exists, disclose it and recuse yourself from the decision-making process. Option B. Prioritize the applicant's strong desire to attend Albany Law School, given your personal connection, and advocate for their admission based on this enthusiasm. Option C. Focus primarily on the applicant's potential to contribute to the law school community, as perceived through your personal knowledge, rather than strictly adhering to academic metrics. Option D. Expedite the review of the applicant's file to ensure a timely decision, leveraging your personal connection to gather additional informal information to support their application. The correct answer is A. Objectively assess the applicant's qualifications against all established admissions criteria, and if a conflict of interest exists, disclose it and recuse yourself from the decision-making process. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate the ethical and regulatory landscape of academic admissions while upholding the integrity of the application process. The pressure to admit a candidate with a strong personal connection, potentially overriding established merit-based criteria, necessitates careful judgment to avoid conflicts of interest and maintain fairness. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective review of the applicant's qualifications against the established admissions criteria for Albany Law School. This approach prioritizes merit and adherence to institutional policies, ensuring that all applicants are evaluated on a level playing field. This aligns with the ethical obligation to maintain the integrity of the admissions process and uphold the reputation of the institution. Furthermore, it is consistent with the principles of fairness and equal opportunity, which are fundamental to academic institutions. An incorrect approach would be to allow personal relationships or perceived potential to unduly influence the admissions decision, bypassing the standard evaluation process. This could lead to accusations of favoritism or bias, undermining the credibility of Albany Law School's admissions. Such an action would violate the ethical duty to act impartially and could potentially contravene any internal policies or guidelines regarding conflicts of interest or preferential treatment in admissions. Another incorrect approach would be to solely rely on the applicant's stated interest in attending Albany Law School as the primary determinant for admission, without a comprehensive assessment of their academic record, standardized test scores, and other relevant qualifications. This overlooks the fundamental purpose of admissions, which is to select candidates who are academically prepared and likely to succeed in the rigorous legal curriculum. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a commitment to transparency, objectivity, and adherence to established policies. Professionals should first identify any potential conflicts of interest and recuse themselves if necessary. They should then meticulously review all available information about the applicant, comparing it against the defined admission standards. If there is any ambiguity or concern, seeking guidance from a supervisor or the admissions committee is a crucial step. The ultimate decision should be defensible based on objective criteria and institutional guidelines, ensuring fairness and maintaining the trust placed in the admissions process. Question 3. Strategic planning requires the Albany Law School Admissions Committee to consider various factors when evaluating applicants. If the committee receives an application from a candidate with a slightly lower GPA and LSAT score than the typical admitted student, but this candidate has demonstrated exceptional leadership in community service and has a compelling personal essay detailing overcoming significant socioeconomic challenges to pursue legal education, how should the committee approach this application to ensure a fair and robust admissions process aligned with the school's mission and regulatory standards? Option A. The committee should consider the candidate's demonstrated leadership and compelling personal narrative as significant qualitative factors that, when weighed against the quantitative metrics, could justify admission, provided these factors align with the school's stated mission of fostering diverse and impactful legal professionals. Option B. The committee should defer the decision until the candidate can provide additional standardized test scores or retake the LSAT, as this is the only way to objectively assess their academic potential. Option C. The committee should consider the candidate's potential for future alumni donations, as this is a crucial aspect of long-term institutional strategic planning. Option D. The committee should primarily focus on the candidate's quantitative metrics, GPA and LSAT, and deny admission if they fall below a strict numerical threshold, as this ensures adherence to objective standards. The correct answer is D. The committee should primarily focus on the candidate's quantitative metrics, GPA, and LSAT, and deny admission if they fall below a strict numerical threshold, as this ensures adherence to objective standards. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because the Albany Law School Admissions Committee must balance the desire to attract a diverse and talented student body with the imperative to adhere strictly to the established admissions criteria and the ethical obligations of fairness and transparency. The challenge lies in interpreting and applying the established criteria in a way that is both equitable and defensible, especially when faced with external pressures or unique candidate circumstances. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any deviations or special considerations are grounded in a clear, consistent, and justifiable rationale that aligns with the school's mission and regulatory compliance. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective evaluation of each applicant's qualifications against the established admissions criteria, with a particular focus on how the applicant's unique background or experiences might contribute to the law school community and the legal profession, as outlined in the school's stated mission and admissions policies. This approach is correct because it upholds the principles of fairness, consistency, and meritocracy that are fundamental to academic admissions. It ensures that decisions are based on demonstrable qualifications and potential, rather than subjective biases or external pressures. Adherence to the school's published admissions guidelines and any relevant New York State or American Bar Association (ABA) accreditation standards for legal education is paramount. This ensures that the admissions process is transparent, equitable, and contributes to maintaining the integrity and reputation of Albany Law School. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize anecdotal evidence or personal appeals over the established admissions criteria. This is ethically problematic because it undermines the fairness of the process for all applicants. It can lead to perceptions of favoritism or bias, eroding trust in the admission system. Furthermore, such an approach risks admitting students who may not possess the foundational academic preparedness necessary to succeed in law school, potentially impacting their academic performance and the school's overall academic standards. This could also violate ABA accreditation standards that require admissions processes to be fair and based on objective criteria. Another incorrect approach would be to make admissions decisions based on perceived future financial contributions to the law school. This is a significant ethical failure, as it introduces a commercial motive into academic admissions, compromising the principle of selecting students based on their academic merit and potential to contribute to the legal field. Such a practice could also lead to discriminatory outcomes, favoring wealthier applicants over equally or more qualified candidates from less affluent backgrounds, and could be seen as a violation of principles of equal opportunity and potentially state or federal regulations concerning non-discrimination in educational institutions. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured and objective review of all application materials. This includes a clear understanding of the admissions criteria and their rationale. When faced with complex cases, committee members should consult established policies and seek consensus among the admissions committee, ensuring that any decisions are well documented and justifiable. If external factors or unique circumstances are considered, they must be evaluated against the established criteria and the school's mission, with a clear articulation of how these factors enhance, rather than detract from, the applicant's suitability for admission. Transparency and consistency are key to maintaining the integrity of the admissions process. Question 4. Analysis of a prospective student's preparation for the Albany Law School entrance exam reveals they are considering engaging a third-party service that claims to provide guaranteed insights into the exam's content and potential question areas, without explicitly stating they will provide actual exam questions or answers. The student believes this service will give them a significant advantage in their preparation. Option A. The student should decline to use the third-party service, as any engagement that purports to offer guaranteed insights beyond standard study materials or legitimate tutoring raises serious concerns about academic integrity and could violate the spirit, if not the letter, of the exam's rules. Option B. The student should proceed with the third-party service, but only after attempting to negotiate a disclaimer from the service that absolves them of any responsibility if the insights are found to be based on unethical practices. Option C. The student should utilize the third-party service, as long as it does not explicitly provide actual exam questions or answers, interpreting guaranteed insights as a form of advanced, proprietary study methodology. Option D. The student should use the third-party service and assume that any information provided is legitimate, as the exam administrators have the responsibility to prevent any unethical practices by third-party services. The correct answer is A. The student should decline to use the third-party service, as any engagement that purports to offer guaranteed insights beyond standard study materials or legitimate tutoring raises serious concerns about academic integrity and could violate the spirit, if not the letter, of the exam's rules. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's desire for academic success and the ethical obligation to uphold academic integrity. The pressure to perform well on entrance exams, coupled with the potential for significant personal and professional advancement, can create a temptation to seek an unfair advantage. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation ethically and in accordance with the established rules of the Albany Law School entrance exam. The correct approach involves a student independently preparing for the exam, utilizing legitimate study resources, and adhering strictly to the exam's stated rules and guidelines. This approach is correct because it aligns with the fundamental principles of academic integrity and fairness that underpin all educational institutions, including law schools. Specifically, it respects the Albany Law School's commitment to evaluating candidates based on their own merit and preparation, ensuring a level playing field for all applicants. Relying solely on one's own knowledge and effort is the ethical standard, as it demonstrates the candidate's genuine qualifications and readiness for the rigor of legal education. An incorrect approach would be to seek or utilize unauthorized assistance, such as obtaining exam questions in advance or receiving answers during the exam. This is ethically unacceptable because it constitutes academic dishonesty, undermining the validity of the examination process and devaluing the achievements of honest candidates. Such actions violate the implicit trust between the applicant and the institution and would likely lead to disqualification and potential future repercussions in academic and professional careers. Another incorrect approach would be to misrepresent one's qualifications or background in an attempt to gain an advantage. This is also ethically reprehensible as it involves deception and dishonesty. Law schools, like Albany Law School, rely on the accuracy of applicant information to make informed admissions decisions. Any form of misrepresentation erodes this trust and demonstrates a lack of integrity, qualities essential for a legal professional. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with a clear understanding of the rules and ethical expectations governing the specific context. In this case, the Albany Law School entrance exam. Candidates should then honestly assess their own preparation and capabilities. If faced with a temptation to engage in unethical behavior, they should consider the potential consequences, not only in terms of immediate disqualification, but also the long-term damage to their reputation and character. Seeking guidance from trusted mentors or the admissions office, if unsure about specific rules, is also a responsible step. Ultimately, the decision should prioritize integrity and fairness above all else. Question 5. Compliance review shows that an applicant to Albany Law School, whose family has significant ties to the legal community and has made substantial donations to the university, has a personal statement that is well written but contains a factual inaccuracy regarding a past internship experience. The admissions committee is aware of the applicant's family background and the potential for future alumni engagement. What is the most appropriate course of action for the admissions committee? Option A. Immediately reject the applicant due to the factual inaccuracy in the personal statement, as this demonstrates a lack of attention to detail and integrity. Option B. Expedite the review process and overlook the factual inaccuracy in the personal statement, given the applicant's family connections and potential for future contributions to the university. Option C. Request a revised personal statement from the applicant to correct the factual inaccuracy before proceeding with the review, prioritizing the correction of errors over a holistic assessment. Option D. Conduct a thorough review of the entire application, including verifying the factual inaccuracy in the personal statement and considering it alongside all other application components, while maintaining strict adherence to the established admissions criteria. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough review of the entire application, including verifying the factual inaccuracy in the personal statement and considering it alongside all other application components, while maintaining strict adherence to the established admissions criteria. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's desire for academic advancement and the integrity of the admissions process. The admissions committee at Albany Law School must balance its duty to uphold rigorous academic standards with its commitment to fairness and equal opportunity for all applicants. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any decision made is both legally sound and ethically defensible, adhering strictly to the established admissions policies and relevant New York State regulations governing higher education. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective review of the applicant's entire application package, including the personal statement, letters of recommendation, and academic record, without allowing external pressures or personal biases to influence the decision. This approach aligns with the ethical obligation of admissions committees to make decisions based on merit and suitability for the program, as outlined in Albany Law School's published admissions criteria and general principles of fair academic evaluation. It respects the established regulatory framework for admissions, which emphasizes transparency and adherence to stated policies. An incorrect approach that involves prioritizing the applicant's family connections over their qualifications would be a direct violation of principles of fairness and meritocracy. This would undermine the integrity of the admissions process and could expose the institution to legal challenges related to discriminatory practices, even if not explicitly stated in admissions policy, as it deviates from the implied promise of an objective review. Another incorrect approach, such as immediately rejecting the applicant based on a single perceived weakness without a comprehensive review, would fail to uphold the principle of holistic review, which is often a component of admissions processes. This could lead to overlooking a strong candidate who might otherwise be a valuable addition to the law school community and could be challenged as arbitrary or capricious. A further incorrect approach, which might involve seeking to expedite the review process solely due to the applicant's background, would also be problematic. This could create an appearance of impropriety and could lead to an incomplete or biased assessment, potentially overlooking critical information that would be necessary for a fair decision. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a commitment to the established admissions policies and procedures. Admissions committee members must act with impartiality, ensuring that all applicants are evaluated based on the same criteria. When faced with potential conflicts of interest or external pressures, professionals should consult institutional policies, seek guidance from supervisors or legal counsel, and document all decisions and the rationale behind them to ensure accountability and transparency. The focus should always be on upholding the integrity of the institution and the fairness of the process. Question 6. The risk matrix shows a potential for disparate impact on applicants from certain geographic regions due to recent changes in the admissions committee's evaluation criteria. The enrollment deadline is approaching rapidly, and the admissions office is under pressure to meet its target class size. Which of the following actions best addresses this situation in accordance with the principles of fair admissions and institutional integrity? Option A. Immediately implement a targeted outreach program to applicants from the identified regions to encourage further application submissions, while simultaneously initiating a review of the evaluation criteria for potential bias. Option B. Halt all admissions decisions and conduct an extensive external audit of the entire admissions process before proceeding, potentially delaying enrollment significantly. Option C. Proceed with admissions decisions as planned to meet the enrollment deadline, deferring any review of the risk matrix findings until after the class is enrolled. Option D. Focus solely on filling the remaining enrollment spots with the most qualified candidates available, regardless of the risk matrix findings, to ensure the academic standing of the incoming class. The correct answer is A. Immediately implement a targeted outreach program to applicants from the identified regions to encourage further application submissions, while simultaneously initiating a review of the evaluation criteria for potential bias. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations to protect sensitive data and ensure fair admissions processes. The pressure to fill spots quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise integrity. Careful judgment is required to navigate these competing demands. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the risk matrix to identify potential biases or discriminatory patterns in the applicant pool and admissions decisions. This approach aligns with the principles of fairness and equal opportunity, which are fundamental to educational institutions and are often reinforced by institutional policies and potentially by broader anti-discrimination laws, though specific New York State regulations for university admissions would be the primary guide. The ethical imperative is to ensure that all applicants are evaluated on merit and that no group is unfairly disadvantaged. This proactive assessment allows for timely intervention to mitigate any identified risks before they impact the admissions cycle. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on meeting enrollment targets without considering the implications of the risk matrix fails to uphold the institution's commitment to fairness. This overlooks potential systemic issues that could lead to discriminatory outcomes, violating ethical standards and potentially institutional policies designed to prevent such issues. Another incorrect approach that involves ignoring the risk matrix entirely because it might reveal uncomfortable truths is professionally negligent. This avoidance of critical information prevents the identification and remediation of potential problems, leaving the institution vulnerable to accusations of bias and potentially violating its own stated values and any applicable regulations concerning fair admissions practices. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Acknowledging and understanding all available data, including risk assessments. 2. Prioritizing ethical considerations and regulatory compliance above short-term pressures. 3. Consulting relevant institutional policies and, if necessary, legal counsel to ensure adherence to all mandates. 4. Developing and implementing a plan to address identified risks in a fair and transparent manner. Question 7. Research into proposed changes in New York State regulations concerning continuing legal education requirements for practicing attorneys reveals a potential shift towards mandatory pro bono service hours. Considering Albany Law School's mission to foster public service and its role in shaping future legal professionals, what is the most comprehensive approach for the school to assess the impact of this proposed regulatory change? Option A. Gauge the immediate reaction of the student body and faculty to the proposal through informal discussions and surveys. Option B. Focus primarily on the potential for increased alumni donations to support pro bono initiatives stemming from the new requirement. Option C. Analyze the potential increase in student volunteerism and the logistical challenges of tracking pro bono hours for current students. Option D. Evaluate how the proposed mandate might affect the school's curriculum, faculty workload, and the financial aid structures available to students, alongside its alignment with the school's public service mission. The correct answer is C. Analyze the potential increase in student volunteerism and the logistical challenges of tracking pro bono hours for current students. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an applicant to demonstrate not only an understanding of legal principles, but also the ability to critically assess the impact of proposed regulatory changes on a specific institution, Albany Law School, within the context of New York State law and its educational mission. The challenge lies in moving beyond a superficial understanding of legal texts to a nuanced evaluation of practical consequences. Careful judgment is required to balance the potential benefits of regulatory reform with the specific operational realities and educational goals of a law school. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that considers multiple facets of the law school's operations and its stakeholders. This includes evaluating how proposed changes might affect curriculum development, faculty recruitment and retention, student admissions and financial aid, alumni engagement, and the school's overall financial health. It also necessitates an understanding of the specific regulatory bodies governing law schools in New York, such as the American Bar Association, ABA's standards for approval of law schools, and how these might interact with or be superseded by proposed state-level regulations. Ethically, this approach aligns with the professional responsibility to engage with proposed changes in a thorough and informed manner, ensuring that any advocacy or response is well-reasoned and considers the broader implications for legal education and the public good. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the immediate financial implications of a proposed regulation, without considering its broader impact on educational quality or student experience, fails to meet professional standards. This narrow focus ignores the ethical imperative to prioritize the educational mission and the long-term viability of the institution. Another incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of a limited group of stakeholders, without rigorous research or data analysis, demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to engage with the complexity of the issue. This can lead to misinformed conclusions and potentially detrimental recommendations. A third incorrect approach that dismisses the proposed regulation outright without a thorough analysis of its potential merits or unintended consequences is also professionally unsound. This demonstrates a closed-mindedness that is antithetical to the critical thinking and objective evaluation expected in legal and academic contexts. Professionals should employ a systematic decision-making framework when faced with such challenges. This involves 1. Clearly defining the scope of the proposed change and its potential areas of impact. 2. Gathering relevant information from diverse sources, including legal statutes, regulatory guidelines, institutional data, and expert opinions. 3. Analyzing the potential positive and negative consequences for all affected parties. 4. Considering alternative solutions or mitigation strategies. And 5. Formulating a well-supported conclusion or recommendation based on the comprehensive analysis. Question 8. The monitoring system demonstrates a statistically significant increase in the rate of identical answer patterns across multiple exam takers in a specific section, deviating from historical norms and expected random distribution. This observation requires an assessment of potential academic integrity issues within the context of the Albany Law School entrance exam's established rules and guidelines. Option A. Immediately disqualify all exam takers exhibiting the similar answer patterns, citing a breach of academic integrity without further investigation. Option B. Initiate a formal review process by comparing the identified answer patterns against the specific prohibitions and guidelines outlined in the Albany Law School entrance exam's academic integrity policy, and if a match is found, proceed with the investigation as per the policy. Option C. Assume the monitoring system is experiencing a technical glitch and disregard the observed data, as it is unlikely to reflect actual misconduct. Option D. Consult general best practices for academic integrity in standardized testing environments to determine the appropriate course of action, without first referencing the specific regulations of the Albany Law School entrance exam. The correct answer is B. Initiate a formal review process by comparing the identified answer patterns against the specific prohibitions and guidelines outlined in the Albany Law School entrance exam's academic integrity policy, and if a match is found, proceed with the investigation as per the policy. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to interpret complex data from a monitoring system and make a judgment about its implications for compliance with Albany Law School's entrance exam regulations. The challenge lies in accurately assessing whether the observed patterns constitute a violation, and if so, what the appropriate course of action should be, all within the strict confines of the exam's specific regulatory framework. Careful judgment is required to avoid misinterpreting data, overreacting, or underreacting, which could have significant consequences for the integrity of the exam process. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective assessment of the monitoring system's output against the established rules and guidelines for the Albany Law School entrance exam. This means identifying specific deviations from expected behavior, correlating them with known prohibited actions, and then initiating a formal review process as outlined by the exam's governing body. This approach is correct because it prioritizes adherence to the explicit regulatory framework of the exam, ensuring fairness and upholding the integrity of the admissions process. It relies on evidence-based conclusions rather than speculation, and follows established protocols for addressing potential irregularities. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the findings without a proper review, assuming the system is malfunctioning or that the observed patterns are benign. This fails to uphold the regulatory requirement to investigate potential breaches and could allow for unfair advantages or compromised exam security. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately assume a violation and impose penalties without a thorough investigation and due process. This violates the principle of fairness and due process, which are implicit in any examination's regulatory framework, and could lead to unjust outcomes. A third incorrect approach would be to consult external, non-exam specific guidelines or general best practices without first consulting the specific regulations governing the Albany Law School entrance exam. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the absolute priority of the exam's own framework and could lead to misapplication of rules. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the specific regulatory environment. This involves clearly identifying the rules, policies, and guidelines that govern the exam. Next, they should gather and objectively analyze all relevant data, such as the monitoring system's output. Following this, they should compare the analyzed data against the established rules to determine if any violations have occurred. If a potential violation is identified, the next step is to follow the prescribed procedural steps for investigation and resolution, which may include reporting to a designated authority or initiating a review process. Throughout this process, maintaining objectivity, fairness, and strict adherence to the exam's specific regulatory framework is paramount. Question 9. Comparative studies suggest that successful applicants to Albany Law School demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of how to approach complex legal issues. When evaluating different analytical frameworks for understanding the impact of a new regulatory policy, which approach is most likely to reflect the deep analytical rigor expected by the institution? Option A. Adopting frameworks that are widely recognized and frequently employed in introductory legal studies, prioritizing familiarity and ease of application over in-depth impact assessment. Option B. Prioritizing frameworks that offer the most comprehensive historical overview of regulatory evolution, regardless of their direct applicability to the new policy's immediate effects. Option C. Selecting frameworks that allow for a detailed examination of the new policy's potential consequences across various stakeholder groups and its alignment with foundational legal principles, even if these frameworks are less commonly cited in general legal discourse. Option D. Focusing on frameworks that emphasize the breadth of information covered, aiming to process the largest volume of related legal documents and scholarly articles. Correct answer is B. Prioritizing frameworks that offer the most comprehensive historical overview of regulatory evolution, regardless of their direct applicability to the new policy's immediate effects. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an applicant to critically evaluate the effectiveness of different analytical approaches to a complex legal problem, specifically in the context of preparing for a rigorous entrance exam. The challenge lies in discerning which method best aligns with the analytical rigor expected by Albany Law School, as indicated by comparative studies of successful applicants. Careful judgment is required to move beyond superficial understanding and identify the approach that demonstrates a deeper grasp of legal reasoning and its practical application, rather than mere memorization or superficial comparison. Correct approach involves a nuanced assessment of how each analytical method contributes to understanding the underlying legal principles and their potential impact. This approach is right because it mirrors the analytical skills Albany Law School seeks to cultivate and assess. By focusing on the depth of analysis and the ability to connect theoretical concepts to practical implications, this method demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of legal scholarship and practice, which is a core expectation for law school candidates. It shows an ability to engage with complex information critically and synthesize it effectively, a prerequisite for success in legal studies. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the volume of information processed fails ethically and professionally because it prioritizes quantity over quality. This overlooks the fundamental legal principle that understanding and application are paramount, not just exposure to data. It suggests a superficial engagement with the material, which is antithetical to the deep analytical skills required in law. Another incorrect approach that emphasizes the superficial similarity between different legal frameworks without exploring the underlying rationale or practical consequences is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a lack of critical thinking and an inability to discern the substantive differences and nuances that are crucial in legal analysis. It risks misinterpreting legal precedents or statutes, leading to flawed conclusions. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes the most commonly used methods without considering their suitability for the specific problem at hand is also flawed. Professional decision-making in law requires adaptability and the selection of the most appropriate tool for the task, not simply adherence to popular trends. This approach indicates a lack of independent judgment and an uncritical acceptance of prevailing practices, which can lead to suboptimal outcomes. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves first clearly defining the objective of the analysis. Then, one must identify and evaluate potential analytical approaches, considering their strengths and weaknesses in relation to the objective and the specific context. This includes assessing how each approach contributes to a deep understanding, facilitates critical evaluation, and supports sound reasoning. Finally, the professional selects the approach that best meets these criteria, demonstrating a commitment to rigor, accuracy, and insightful analysis. Question 10. Stakeholder feedback indicates concerns regarding the fairness of a recent admissions decision for a highly sought-after program at Albany Law School, suggesting potential bias. What is the most appropriate initial step for the admissions committee to take? Option A. Initiate a new, separate admissions process for this applicant to ensure a completely fresh evaluation, bypassing the original committee's decision. Option B. Conduct a thorough and impartial review of the applicant's file and the admissions committee's deliberations, strictly adhering to Albany Law School's established admissions policies and procedures to determine if any irregularities occurred. Option C. Publicly dismiss the stakeholder feedback as unsubstantiated to maintain the perceived integrity of the admissions process. Option D. Immediately rescind the offer of admission to address the stakeholder concerns and prevent further controversy. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough and impartial review of the applicant's file and the admissions committee's deliberations, strictly adhering to Albany Law School's established admissions policies and procedures to determine if any irregularities occurred. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need to respond to external concerns with the internal processes and ethical obligations of the law school. The pressure from stakeholders, while potentially valid, must be addressed through established channels and with due consideration for fairness and due process. A hasty or biased response could undermine the integrity of the admissions process and damage the institution's reputation. The correct approach involves a thorough, impartial review of the feedback, adhering strictly to Albany Law School's established admissions policies and procedures. This approach is ethically sound and regulatorily compliant because it prioritizes fairness, consistency, and evidence-based decision-making. It respects the rights of all applicants and upholds the integrity of the admissions committee's role. By initiating a formal review process, the law school demonstrates its commitment to its own standards and to addressing concerns in a structured, defensible manner. This aligns with the general principles of administrative law and institutional governance, which emphasize procedural regularity and substantive fairness. An incorrect approach would be to immediately reverse the admissions decision based solely on the stakeholder feedback without a proper review. This would be ethically problematic as it bypasses established procedures and could be perceived as succumbing to external pressure rather than making a decision based on merit and policy. It also fails to provide a fair hearing or opportunity for the applicant to understand the basis of the reversal. Such an action could also violate principles of administrative due process, as it implies a lack of consistent application of standards and potentially arbitrary decision-making. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the feedback outright without any form of acknowledgement or internal consideration. This would be professionally negligent and ethically questionable, as it ignores potential systemic issues or valid concerns raised by stakeholders. It demonstrates a lack of responsiveness and could lead to a perception of arrogance or insensitivity, damaging the law school's relationship with its community and potentially overlooking genuine problems in the admissions process. This failure to engage with feedback can also have regulatory implications if it points to discriminatory practices or violations of institutional policies. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Acknowledging receipt of the feedback. 2. Consulting relevant institutional policies and procedures for handling such concerns. 3. Initiating a formal, impartial review process that gathers all necessary information and allows for due consideration of all relevant factors. 4. Making a decision based on the findings of the review in accordance with established policies and ethical principles. 5. Communicating the decision and its rationale appropriately, while maintaining confidentiality where required. Question 11. Regulatory review indicates that Albany Law School's entrance examination assesses an applicant's ability to critically analyze and apply legal principles. Considering the impact assessment of an applicant's preparation, which approach best demonstrates readiness for the rigors of legal education and adherence to professional standards. Option A. Prioritizing the development of persuasive writing skills without a corresponding focus on the analytical and reasoning components emphasized by the exam. Option B. focusing solely on memorizing past exam questions and answers to identify patterns and predict future questions. Option C. Engaging in comprehensive study of core legal concepts and analytical reasoning skills, practicing application through hypothetical scenarios relevant to the exam's stated objectives. Option D. Relying on informal study groups that primarily discuss general legal news and current events without structured review of exam content. The correct answer is B. Focusing solely on memorizing past exam questions and answers to identify patterns and predict future questions. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to navigate the complex and often nuanced requirements for admission to a law school, specifically Albany Law School, while adhering to the principles of regulatory compliance and ethical conduct inherent in the legal profession. The challenge lies in accurately interpreting and applying the stated admission criteria, which are governed by the internal policies and potentially external accreditation standards of Albany Law School, to one's own qualifications. A careful judgment is required to ensure that all submitted information is truthful, complete, and directly addresses the stated requirements, avoiding any misrepresentation or omission that could jeopardize the application. The correct approach involves a thorough and honest self-assessment against each stated admission criterion, providing clear and verifiable evidence where required. This approach aligns with the ethical obligation of candor and integrity expected of all aspiring legal professionals. Specifically, it demonstrates respect for the admissions process and the institution's standards, which are designed to ensure a qualified and committed student body. By directly addressing each requirement with accurate information, the applicant upholds the principle of truthfulness in all dealings, a cornerstone of legal ethics. An incorrect approach that focuses on providing only the minimum required information without demonstrating a clear understanding of the underlying intent of each criterion would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a lack of diligence and a potential misinterpretation of the admissions committee's expectations, which often seek more than just a superficial fulfillment of requirements. Another incorrect approach that involves inferring or assuming missing information rather than seeking clarification or providing direct evidence would be ethically flawed. This demonstrates a lack of precision and a disregard for the importance of factual accuracy in formal application. Finally, an approach that attempts to game the system by highlighting tangential experiences that do not directly address the stated criteria, while omitting relevant but less impressive information, would be a significant ethical breach. This suggests a lack of transparency and an attempt to mislead the admissions committee, undermining the integrity of the application process. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes accuracy, completeness, and transparency. This involves meticulously reviewing all application instructions and requirements, cross-referencing personal qualifications against these criteria, and seeking clarification from the admissions office for any ambiguities. The process should be guided by a commitment to honesty and a thorough understanding of the ethical responsibilities associated with professional applications. Question 12. Consider a scenario where an applicant to Albany Law School is preparing their personal statement. They have had a significant academic setback in their sophomore year due to a personal health issue, which resulted in a lower GPA for that semester. The applicant is concerned this will negatively impact their chances of admission. Which approach to addressing this in the personal statement is most aligned with the ethical standards and expectations of a law school admissions process? Option A. Downplay the health issue significantly, referring to it vaguely as a difficult period without providing any context or explanation, hoping the admissions committee will not inquire further. Option B. Focus the personal statement entirely on achievements and positive experiences, omitting any mention of the academic setback to present an unblemished record. Option C. Fabricate a compelling narrative about overcoming a different, more dramatic challenge that did not actually occur, believing it will be more impressive to the admissions committee than the actual health issue. Option D. Briefly acknowledge the health issue and the resulting academic dip, explaining the circumstances and highlighting the subsequent recovery and improved academic performance in later semesters, demonstrating resilience and growth. The correct answer is B. Focus the personal statement entirely on achievements and positive experiences, omitting any mention of the academic setback to present an unblemished record. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an applicant to navigate the complex and often nuanced admissions process of a law school, specifically Albany Law School, while adhering to its stated principles and the ethical considerations inherent in such applications. The challenge lies in balancing the desire to present oneself favorably with the absolute necessity of honesty and integrity, as any misrepresentation can have severe consequences. Careful judgment is required to discern between legitimate self-promotion and deceptive practices. The correct approach involves a thorough and truthful self-assessment, focusing on presenting one's experiences and qualifications accurately, and in a manner that highlights relevant skills and potential for success in law school. This approach is ethically sound and aligns with the principles of academic integrity expected by institutions like Albany Law School. Specifically, it respects the admissions committee's need for accurate information to make informed decisions and upholds the applicant's own ethical responsibility to be truthful. The regulatory framework for university admissions, while not a formal statute in the same way as legal statutes, is governed by institutional policies and ethical standards that prioritize honesty. Misrepresenting one's academic record or extracurricular involvement directly violates these implicit and explicit expectations. An incorrect approach that exaggerates or fabricates experiences is professionally unacceptable because it constitutes a breach of trust and academic integrity. This failure stems from a disregard for the fundamental ethical obligation of honesty in all professional and academic dealings. Such misrepresentation undermines the fairness of the admissions process, potentially disadvantaging more deserving candidates. Furthermore, if discovered, it can lead to immediate rejection of the application or, if admitted, revocation of admission or expulsion, severely damaging the applicant's future academic and professional prospects. Another incorrect approach, such as omitting relevant information that might reflect negatively, also constitutes a form of deception. While not an outright fabrication, it creates a misleading picture and fails to provide the admissions committee with the complete context necessary for a fair evaluation. This omission violates the spirit of transparency and can be viewed as an attempt to manipulate the decision-making process. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a commitment to absolute truthfulness. Applicants should meticulously review their qualifications and experiences, focusing on how to present them honestly and effectively. If there are aspects that are less favorable, the applicant should consider how to address them transparently, perhaps by explaining challenges overcome or lessons learned, rather than attempting to conceal or distort them. Consulting with mentors, advisors, or even reviewing Albany Law School's admissions guidelines for any specific advice on application content can be beneficial. The overarching principle should be to present an authentic and accurate representation of oneself, trusting that the admissions committee will evaluate the application based on genuine merit. Question 13. The control framework reveals that Albany Law School's application process mandates complete and truthful disclosure of all academic history. An applicant, while otherwise qualified, was placed on academic probation during their undergraduate studies due to a temporary personal hardship. The applicant is concerned that this probation might negatively impact their chances of admission. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical expectations for an Albany Law School applicant in this situation? Option A. Only disclose the academic probation if specifically asked about it during an interview, and then provide a vague and generalized reason. Option B. Omit any mention of the academic probation from the application, focusing instead on the applicant's overall strong GPA and other achievements. Option C. State in the application that the probation was due to a minor administrative error without further elaboration. Option D. Fully disclose the academic probation in the application, providing a brief, factual explanation of the circumstances that led to it, and highlighting any subsequent academic improvement. The correct answer is D. Fully disclose the academic probation in the application, providing a brief, factual explanation of the circumstances that led to it, and highlighting any subsequent academic improvement. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an applicant to navigate the ethical considerations of academic integrity while simultaneously demonstrating their understanding of the legal and regulatory landscape relevant to law school admissions. The applicant must balance the desire to present themselves favorably with the absolute requirement of honesty and adherence to the Albany Law School's stated application policies. A deep understanding of the implications of misrepresentation, even if seemingly minor, is crucial. The correct approach involves a transparent and forthright disclosure of the applicant's academic record, including any instances of academic probation. This aligns with the core ethical principles of honesty and integrity expected of all aspiring legal professionals, and is directly supported by the explicit requirements of most university admissions processes, including those at Albany Law School, which typically mandate truthful and complete disclosure of all academic history. By proactively addressing the probation, the applicant demonstrates accountability and maturity, which are valued qualities in legal education. An incorrect approach that omits or downplays the academic probation is professionally unacceptable. This failure constitutes a direct violation of the principle of candor and honesty, which is foundational to legal ethics and academic integrity. Such an omission could be interpreted as an attempt to mislead the admissions committee, potentially leading to the rejection of the application or, if discovered later, more severe consequences such as rescission of admission or disciplinary action. Another incorrect approach, such as fabricating an explanation for the probation that is untrue, also violates the principle of honesty and introduces further misrepresentation, compounding the ethical breach. A third incorrect approach, focusing solely on the positive aspects of their academic record without acknowledging the probation, fails to provide a complete and accurate picture, thereby undermining the admissions committee's ability to make a fully informed decision. Professionals should approach such situations by first consulting the specific application instructions and any accompanying ethical guidelines provided by the institution. They should then consider the overarching ethical obligations of honesty and integrity. The decision-making process should involve a commitment to full disclosure, even when it involves potentially negative information, and a focus on presenting the facts accurately and contextually. If clarification is needed regarding how to best present such information, direct communication with the admissions office is the most appropriate step. Question 14. The investigation demonstrates that a prospective law student, during their admissions interview at Albany Law School, disclosed to an admissions officer that they have been experiencing increasingly violent thoughts directed towards a specific individual with whom they have a past conflict. The student expressed a desire to make them pay, and indicated they have been researching methods to achieve this. The admissions officer is now considering how to respond to this disclosure. Option A. Immediately report the student's statements to law enforcement and the individual the student threatened without further inquiry. Option B. Advise the student that such disclosures are confidential and that no action will be taken, encouraging them to seek personal counseling. Option C. Discuss the student's statements in a general manner with other admissions officers to gauge their reactions and potential courses of action, without revealing the student's identity. Option D. Conduct a thorough assessment of the imminence and severity of the threat. Consult with Albany Law School's legal counsel regarding New York's duty to warn/protect exceptions to confidentiality, and then take appropriate action based on that consultation. The correct answer is A. Immediately report the student's statements to law enforcement and the individual the student threatened without further inquiry. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the ethical obligation of maintaining client confidentiality versus the potential need to disclose information to prevent harm. The applicant must navigate the delicate balance between these competing duties, understanding that unauthorized disclosure can have severe legal and professional repercussions, while a failure to act when harm is imminent could also lead to liability. Careful judgment is required to assess the severity and imminence of the threat, and to determine if any exceptions to confidentiality apply under New York law, which governs Albany Law School. The correct approach involves a thorough, fact-specific assessment of the situation to determine if the client's stated intent to harm another person constitutes a clear and imminent danger. If such a danger is identified, the applicant must then consider the narrow exceptions to confidentiality permitted under New York's ethical rules and statutes, which may allow for disclosure to prevent such harm. This approach prioritizes both the client's right to confidentiality and the duty to protect potential victims, adhering to the principle of proportionality in any disclosure. An incorrect approach that involves immediate, unqualified disclosure without a proper assessment of imminence and severity would violate the fundamental duty of confidentiality owed to the client. This would be a breach of ethical rules and potentially New York law, as confidentiality is a cornerstone of the attorney-client relationship. Another incorrect approach, that of doing nothing despite a clear and imminent danger, would be professionally negligent and could expose the applicant to liability for failing to take reasonable steps to prevent foreseeable harm. This would disregard the ethical duty to act responsibly when confronted with information indicating a serious threat. A third incorrect approach, that of seeking broad, generalized advice from colleagues without specific client identification or a clear articulation of the legal and ethical quandaries, might be insufficient to address the immediate need for action, or could inadvertently breach confidentiality through vague disclosures. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive understanding of the facts, followed by a rigorous analysis of applicable ethical rules and laws. This includes identifying any exceptions to confidentiality, assessing the imminence and severity of any threatened harm, and considering the least restrictive means necessary to mitigate that harm. Consultation with ethics counsel or supervisors, while maintaining confidentiality, is often a prudent step in complex situations. Question 15. The analysis reveals that applicants to Albany Law School are expected to demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of legal principles and analytical reasoning. Considering the exam's emphasis on comparative analysis and its strict adherence to its own internal guidelines, which of the following approaches best reflects a strategy for an applicant to address a question that requires comparing two distinct legal doctrines, where one doctrine is presented as a hypothetical construct within the exam's instructions, and the other is a recognized principle from a common law jurisdiction, while strictly adhering to the exam's self-imposed jurisdictional limitations. Option A. Analyze the hypothetical doctrine solely based on its internal logic as presented in the exam instructions, and then separately analyze the common law doctrine based on its established principles, concluding with a brief statement on their potential differences without attempting a direct comparative framework. Option B. Construct a novel legal theory that synthesizes elements of both the hypothetical and common law doctrines, presenting it as a potential unified approach, and then evaluate its strengths and weaknesses without explicitly referencing the exam's jurisdictional constraints. Option C. Focus primarily on researching external legal databases for established comparative analyses of similar hypothetical and real-world legal doctrines, regardless of their origin, to find pre-existing frameworks for comparison. Option D. Prioritize a deep dive into the historical evolution and case law of the common law doctrine, then attempt to draw parallels to the hypothetical doctrine based on inferred similarities, while explicitly acknowledging the hypothetical nature of the latter and the exam's jurisdictional scope. The correct answer is D. Prioritize a deep dive into the historical evolution and case law of the common law doctrine, then attempt to draw parallels to the hypothetical doctrine based on inferred similarities, while explicitly acknowledging the hypothetical nature of the latter and the exam's jurisdictional scope. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an applicant to navigate the nuanced requirements of a competitive law school entrance exam, specifically Albany Law School, while adhering to strict, self-imposed jurisdictional and formatting constraints. The core difficulty lies in generating a question that is both relevant to the exam's context and adheres to the absolute priority of following only the specified regulatory framework, which in this case is the Albany Law School entrance exam's own guidelines. This necessitates a deep understanding of what constitutes a regulatory framework for an entrance exam, which is less about external laws and more about the internal rules and expectations set by the institution itself. The correct approach involves crafting a question that probes an applicant's ability to understand and apply the specific, albeit self-defined, regulatory framework of the exam itself, focusing on comparative analysis as requested. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the prompt's core requirement, generating a question based on the university entrance exam's context and adhering to its implicit rules, the prompt's own constraints. The prompt's emphasis on only the regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines specified for exam, Albany Law School entrance exam, means the question must be framed within the context of the exam's own structure and demands, including the comparative analysis requirement. The prompt's explicit instruction to avoid mathematical focus and to provide deep analysis of approaches further guides the creation of a conceptually driven question. An incorrect approach would be to generate a question that relies on external legal frameworks not specified for the Albany Law School entrance exam, even if they are related to law. For instance, a question about New York State Bar exam rules or federal regulatory statutes would be incorrect because the prompt strictly limits the scope to the Albany Law School entrance exam itself. Another incorrect approach would be to create a question that is primarily mathematical or calculation-based, directly violating the explicit instruction to avoid such content. A third incorrect approach would be to generate a question that does not involve comparative analysis, failing to meet a key requirement of the prompt. The professional decision-making process for creating such a question involves a meticulous deconstruction of the prompt's constraints. First, identify the absolute priorities, adherence to the specified jurisdiction, Albany Law School entrance exams framework, and the required format. Second, understand the core task, generating an original question related to the exam's context. Third, incorporate the specified analytical approach, comparative analysis, and content restrictions, non-mathematical, deep analysis. Finally, construct the question and options, ensuring each element directly addresses these requirements, and that the explanation rigorously justifies the correct approach while clearly identifying the failures of incorrect ones based on the prompt's explicit rules. Question 16. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a proposed online-only paralegal certificate program could significantly increase revenue for Albany Law School, but it would require a streamlined admissions process and a reduced faculty-to-student ratio compared to the traditional Juris Doctor program. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical obligations of an ABA-accredited law school operating in New York State? Option A. Delay the decision on the paralegal certificate program until a more detailed market analysis can be completed, without immediately addressing the potential regulatory and ethical implications. Option B. Develop the paralegal certificate program with admissions and faculty-to-student ratio requirements that are comparable to or exceed the standards for the Juris Doctor program, even if this reduces the projected financial return. Option C. Implement the paralegal certificate program as proposed, prioritizing the financial benefits and assuming that less stringent standards are acceptable for non-JD programs. Option D. Propose a hybrid paralegal certificate program that offers some online components, but requires a significant on-campus presence to ensure a more traditional educational experience. The correct answer is C. Implement the paralegal certificate program as proposed, prioritizing the financial benefits and assuming that less stringent standards are acceptable for non-JD programs. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the potential benefits of a new program with the ethical obligations and regulatory requirements governing educational institutions. The core of the challenge lies in ensuring that any cost-benefit analysis does not override fundamental principles of fairness, accessibility, and compliance with the New York State Education Department's NISD regulations for law school admissions and operations. Careful judgment is required to identify and mitigate potential conflicts between financial considerations and the institution's mission and legal duties. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review that prioritizes regulatory compliance and ethical considerations above purely financial gains. This means ensuring that any proposed program, regardless of its perceived cost-benefit advantages, adheres strictly to NISD guidelines concerning admission standards, curriculum, faculty qualifications, and student support services. The ethical justification for this approach is rooted in the fiduciary duty of the law school to its students and the public to provide a high-quality, legally compliant legal education. This aligns with the overarching goal of NISD to maintain rigorous standards for legal education within the state. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on maximizing revenue without adequate consideration for regulatory adherence would be professionally unacceptable. For instance, proposing to admit a higher number of students than the faculty and resources can adequately support, simply to increase tuition revenue, would violate NISD implicit and explicit requirements for maintaining educational quality and student success. This could lead to a decline in the educational experience, potentially impacting graduates' ability to pass the bar exam and practice law, and could result in sanctions from NISD. Another incorrect approach might involve cutting essential student support services, such as academic advising or career services, to reduce operational costs, even if a cost-benefit analysis suggests it is financially prudent. This would be ethically problematic, as it compromises the institution's commitment to student development and success, and could also fall afoul of NISD expectations for comprehensive student support. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a multi-stakeholder review. This includes legal counsel to ensure compliance with all applicable New York State laws and NISD regulations, academic leadership to assess educational impact, and financial officers to evaluate fiscal implications. The process must begin with a clear understanding of the regulatory landscape and ethical commitments, followed by an assessment of how any proposed initiative aligns with these foundational principles. Any financial analysis should be conducted within this framework, ensuring that cost-saving measures do not compromise the quality of education or violate legal and ethical standards. Question 17. To address the challenge of accurately presenting one's qualifications on a law school application, which of the following approaches best aligns with the ethical and regulatory expectations for aspiring legal professionals in the United States? Option A. Accurately reporting all academic achievements, extracurricular involvement, and relevant experiences, providing clear and verifiable details for each claim. Option B. Omitting any mention of academic setbacks or disciplinary issues that occurred during undergraduate studies to avoid potential negative perceptions. Option C. Creating fictional leadership roles or exaggerating the impact of volunteer work to demonstrate a broader range of skills and experiences. Option D. Inflating the GPA by rounding up grades or selectively reporting only the highest marks from each course to present a stronger academic profile. The correct answer is A. Accurately reporting all academic achievements, extracurricular involvement, and relevant experiences, providing clear and verifiable details for each claim. Explanation. The scenario presents a common ethical dilemma faced by aspiring law students: how to accurately represent their academic qualifications and experiences on an application for a competitive program like Albany Law School. The challenge lies in balancing the desire to present oneself favorably with the absolute requirement of honesty and integrity, which are foundational to the legal profession. Misrepresenting information, even if seemingly minor, can have severe consequences, including application rejection, rescinded admissions, and damage to one's reputation. Careful judgment is required to discern between legitimate emphasis and outright fabrication. The correct approach involves a truthful and accurate representation of all academic achievements, extracurricular activities, and any relevant work or volunteer experience. This means clearly stating grades as they were earned, accurately describing the scope and nature of any leadership roles or projects, and providing verifiable details for all claims. Regulatory frameworks governing law school admissions, and indeed the legal profession itself, emphasize candor and honesty. For instance, the American Bar Association, ABA standards for approval of law schools, which guide admissions practices, implicitly require applicants to provide truthful information. Furthermore, the ethical obligations of future legal professionals, as codified in state bar rules of professional conduct, demand honesty in all dealings, including the application process. Adhering to these principles ensures that the applicant is evaluated on their genuine merits and maintains the integrity of the admissions process. An incorrect approach that exaggerates academic performance by misrepresenting GPA or course grades is ethically unacceptable. This constitutes a direct violation of honesty and integrity, undermining the trust placed in applicants. Such misrepresentation can lead to immediate rejection or future disciplinary action if discovered after admission. Another incorrect approach that fabricates or significantly embellishes descriptions of leadership roles or volunteer work is also problematic. While it is permissible to highlight responsibilities and achievements, inventing experiences or inflating their impact is dishonest and misleads the admissions committee about the applicant's actual capabilities and contributions. This can lead to an applicant being admitted based on false pretenses, which is detrimental to both the applicant and the institution. Finally, an approach that omits relevant information that might reflect negatively, such as academic probation or disciplinary actions, is also a failure of candor. Transparency about challenges and how they were overcome is often viewed more favorably than concealment. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes truthfulness and accuracy above all else. This involves a thorough review of all application materials to ensure every statement is verifiable and accurately reflects reality. When in doubt about how to phrase an experience or achievement, it is always better to err on the side of conservative, factual reporting. Seeking clarification from admissions offices on how to best present certain information, if genuinely unsure, is also a prudent step. The overarching principle is to present a genuine and unvarnished picture of oneself, allowing the admissions committee to make an informed decision based on factual evidence. Question 18. The review process indicates that an applicant to Albany Law School has disclosed a past instance of academic dishonesty during their undergraduate studies. The applicant has provided a brief explanation of the circumstances. Which of the following represents the most appropriate initial step for the Albany Law School Admissions Committee to take in evaluating this applicant? Option A. Rely on the applicant's brief explanation and assume the matter is resolved, proceeding with the application review without further inquiry. Option B. Immediately deny the application based on the disclosure of academic dishonesty, as it reflects poorly on the applicant's character. Option C. Consult Albany Law School's official admissions policy manual to determine the specific criteria and procedures for evaluating disclosures of academic misconduct. Option D. Compare the applicant's situation to how similar disclosures are handled by other prominent law schools to gauge a standard response. The correct answer is B. Immediately deny the application based on the disclosure of academic dishonesty, as it reflects poorly on the applicant's character. Explanation. The review process indicates a potential misinterpretation of Albany Law School's admission policies regarding prior academic misconduct. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of the school's specific guidelines, the ethical obligations of admissions personnel, and the potential impact of a decision on both the applicant and the institution's integrity. Admissions officers must balance fairness to applicants with the responsibility to uphold the academic standards and reputation of Albany Law School. Careful judgment is required to ensure that decisions are consistent, equitable, and compliant with established protocols. The correct approach involves a thorough review of Albany Law School's official admissions policies, specifically those pertaining to the disclosure and evaluation of prior academic misconduct. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to the established regulatory framework and internal guidelines of the institution. By consulting the official policies, the admissions committee ensures that their decision is based on the documented criteria and procedures set forth by Albany Law School, thereby maintaining fairness and consistency in the admissions process. This also aligns with the ethical principle of transparency and adherence to institutional rules. An incorrect approach would be to make a decision based on anecdotal evidence or general assumptions about how other law schools handle similar situations. This is ethically and regulatorily flawed because it disregards Albany Law School's specific policies, leading to an inconsistent and potentially unfair decision. It also risks violating internal procedures and could set a precedent for future decisions that are not grounded in the school's established standards. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the applicant's disclosure of prior misconduct without a proper evaluation, perhaps due to a perceived minor nature of the offense. This is problematic as it fails to acknowledge the school's policy on disclosure and evaluation, potentially overlooking factors that the school deems important in its admissions criteria. It also undermines the principle of due diligence in the admissions process. A third incorrect approach would be to allow personal biases or sympathies to influence the decision, overriding the established policy. This is a significant ethical failure, as it compromises the objectivity and fairness of the admissions process. Decisions must be based on merit and adherence to policy, not on subjective feelings. To maintain the integrity of Albany Law School's admissions, a professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Identifying the relevant institutional policies and guidelines. 2. Gathering all necessary information pertaining to the applicant's situation. 3. Applying the established policies objectively and consistently. 4. Consulting with relevant committees or superiors if ambiguity exists. 5. Documenting the decision-making process and the rationale behind the final decision. This structured approach ensures fairness, compliance, and accountability. Question 19. What factors determine an applicant's eligibility for admission to Albany Law School? considering the regulatory framework governing legal education in New York State and the overarching principles of professional conduct expected of future legal practitioners. Option A. The applicant's family's financial standing and their ability to contribute to the law school's endowment, alongside their undergraduate major. Option B. The applicant's social media presence and their alignment with the perceived political leanings of the admissions committee. Option C. The applicant's participation in prestigious but non-academic extracurricular activities, regardless of the skills or insights gained. Option D. A holistic review of academic achievements, GPA, LSAT scores, analytical and writing skills demonstrated in essays and recommendations, and evidence of personal qualities such as integrity, resilience, and commitment to public service. The correct answer is D. A holistic review of academic achievements, GPA, LSAT scores, analytical and writing skills demonstrated in essays and recommendations, and evidence of personal qualities such as integrity, resilience, and commitment to public service. Explanation. This scenario presents a challenge for aspiring law students by requiring them to critically evaluate the foundational principles of legal education admission, specifically within the context of New York State's regulatory framework for law schools, as Albany Law School operates under these regulations. The core difficulty lies in discerning which factors are legitimately considered by an admissions committee versus those that are either irrelevant, ethically questionable, or outside the scope of permissible evaluation criteria under New York State's educational and professional conduct rules. Admissions decisions must be based on a holistic review that predicts a candidate's likelihood of success in law school and the legal profession, while strictly adhering to principles of fairness, non-discrimination, and academic merit. The correct approach emphasizes a comprehensive evaluation of academic preparedness, demonstrated aptitude for critical thinking and analytical reasoning, and evidence of personal qualities conducive to legal study and practice. This aligns with the implicit regulatory expectation that law schools admit candidates who possess the intellectual capacity and ethical grounding to succeed, as mandated by the American Bar Association, ABA standards for approval of law schools, which New York State law schools must adhere to. These standards, interpreted and enforced by the New York State Board of Law Examiners in their Character and Fitness Review for bar admission, indirectly guide admissions by ensuring a baseline of competence and integrity. Factors such as GPA, LSAT scores, personal essays, letters of recommendation, and relevant life experiences are all standard components of a holistic review designed to assess these qualities. An incorrect approach that prioritizes factors unrelated to academic potential or ethical suitability, such as a candidate's socioeconomic background, in a way that suggests preferential treatment or exclusion based on wealth, would be ethically problematic and potentially violate non-discrimination principles implicitly embedded in educational regulations. Similarly, focusing on extracurricular activities solely for their prestige rather than the skills or insights they demonstrate would be a misapplication of evaluative criteria. Furthermore, considering factors that are not directly indicative of a candidate's ability to succeed in law school or uphold professional ethics, such as their political affiliations or religious beliefs, would be a clear violation of principles of fairness and non-discrimination, and could contravene the spirit, if not the letter, of regulations governing educational institutions. The professional decision-making process for admissions committees involves a structured, multifaceted review that balances academic metrics with qualitative assessments. It requires a deep understanding of the skills and character traits necessary for legal success, informed by the regulatory landscape governing legal education and professional responsibility in New York. Admissions officers must be trained to identify and mitigate potential biases, ensuring that decisions are grounded in objective criteria and a fair assessment of each applicant's potential contribution to the legal profession. Question 20. The audit findings indicate a potential discrepancy in the application file of a highly recommended candidate for Albany Law School, where a required standardized test score appears to be marginally below the stated minimum threshold, yet the candidate possesses exceptional extracurricular achievements and a compelling personal statement. As a member of the admissions committee, what is the most appropriate course of action to ensure regulatory compliance and uphold the integrity of the admissions process? Option A. Immediately advocate for the candidate's admission to the full admissions committee, highlighting their strengths and requesting a waiver for the test score based on their overall profile. Option B. discreetly request that the applicant retake the standardized test and submit a new score, without informing the admissions committee of the initial discrepancy or the request. Option C. Present the complete application file, including the discrepancy and the candidate's strengths, to the admissions committee for a thorough review and a decision based on established policies and potential for a formal waiver process. Option D. Proceed with admitting the candidate, assuming the discrepancy is minor and their other qualifications compensate for it, without further formal discussion or documentation of the exception. The correct answer is A. Immediately advocate for the candidate's admission to the full admissions committee, highlighting their strengths and requesting a waiver for the test score based on their overall profile. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in academic institutions where the integrity of admissions processes must be rigorously maintained. The professional challenge lies in balancing the desire to support a promising candidate with the absolute necessity of adhering to established admissions policies and ethical standards. Failure to do so can undermine the credibility of the institution and create an unfair playing field for other applicants. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any exceptions or considerations are handled transparently and in accordance with established protocols, preventing even the appearance of impropriety. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the applicant's file against the established admissions criteria and a transparent discussion of any potential discrepancies or special circumstances with the admissions committee. This upholds the principle of fairness and equal treatment for all applicants. It ensures that decisions are made based on objective criteria and institutional policy, rather than on personal influence or ad hoc consideration. This aligns with the ethical obligation to maintain the integrity of the admissions process and the academic standards of Albany Law School. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves directly intervening to ensure the applicant's admission without a formal review process. This bypasses established procedures and can be seen as favoritism, violating principles of fairness and equal opportunity. It also undermines the authority and role of the admissions committee, potentially leading to a perception of bias and compromising the institution's reputation. Another incorrect approach is to overlook the discrepancy and proceed with admission without addressing it. This is a failure of due diligence and can lead to admitting students who do not meet the required standards, thereby lowering academic rigor. It also creates a precedent for future leniency, making it difficult to enforce standards consistently. A third incorrect approach is to attempt to subtly alter the applicant's file to fit the criteria. This constitutes a serious ethical breach and potentially fraudulent behavior. It directly violates the trust placed in admissions officers and can have severe legal and professional consequences for the individual and the institution. Professional reasoning. Professionals in admissions should always prioritize adherence to established policies and ethical guidelines. When faced with a situation involving a potentially deserving candidate with a minor discrepancy, the decision-making process should involve 1. Understanding the specific admissions criteria and policies. 2. Objectively assessing the applicant's file against these criteria. 3. If a discrepancy exists, consulting with the relevant committee or designated authority to determine the appropriate course of action, ensuring transparency and documentation. 4. Prioritizing fairness, integrity, and the long-term reputation of the institution above all else.